Hi, UMA students. My name is Vicki Weissman, and I am a UMA instructor. I am here tonight to talk to you once again about communication in healthcare. We are focusing on Chapter 2 in our textbook, Multicultural Therapeutic Communication. You have been learning about culture and what makes up different cultures, and how you as healthcare providers can be more sensitive and aware of people from different cultures, backgrounds, religions, ethnicities, all the things that make us who we are. The United States is a melting pot, and so many of us come from different backgrounds and might see healthcare in different ways. We might have different ways we approach treatment, ways in which we will take medication, even vaccines. There's a lot of differences amongst all of us, especially in the world we are living in today in 2020, the year 2020. So, in order to be effective healthcare communicators, we really need to digest all of this information so that we can be effective, we can be empathetic, and we can be good listeners as healthcare communicators. So let's take a case, for example. Let's say you are working as a medical assistant in an office and a patient comes in who is from a Hispanic background, let's say, and you come from the Midwest, and maybe you have not spent too much time with people who are Hispanic. Now, I'm just using this as an example because we all run into different people sometimes who we aren't as familiar with their culture and their background. And your Hispanic patient says to you, "Oh, that last doctor I saw, he was very bad." Now, you might think, bad. Well, that means he did something inappropriate, said something inappropriate, or maybe he's just a bad doctor and misdiagnosed something. But the patient might use the word bad and might have a different meaning behind it. Maybe she meant that he told bad jokes, or maybe she did mean that he was a bad doctor. But sometimes we just don't know exactly what a person is referring to. So, what would you do in that situation if you didn't quite understand what a patient was saying to you? Would you ask for clarification, like, what do you mean when you say bad? Would you try to offer some resolution? Would you say, well, I'm sorry that you had an experience like that. How can we make it better for you this time? You have to catch those differences, something that maybe you wouldn't say if you were going to the doctor, but something somebody else feels perfectly comfortable saying. You have to be aware of those nuances and that everyone is different. And just because you understand and see things a certain way does not mean that that patient walking in the door sees things the same way. So some of this information is stuff you might be like, yeah, I know that. And we might take it for granted a little. But then we can be in a situation when we're at work and something presents itself to us and you're like, wow, I didn't see that, or I missed that comment. And oops, maybe I put my foot in my mouth. I shouldn't have said such and such. So we really want you to kind of be aware of these things so that you can do a good job and not feel like you've said the wrong thing. And if you do, though, how are you going to correct it? Are you just going to let it go by, or are you going to be like, you know what, I might have misspoke there. I apologize. Let's try to fix this situation. So those are different ways you can help to resolve a situation. If you feel like maybe you did miss something in terms of someone's cultural background and maybe misspoke, because trust me, it happens to everyone. So nobody's perfect. We're just trying to get information to you so you can be more informed and, of course, more educated, which is why you're here at UMA. Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to move on to our PowerPoint that we have for today. So just hold on one moment. Hi, we're back here at Chapter 2, Multicultural Therapeutic Communication. We're talking about, in this video, the therapeutic response, how we as healthcare providers respond to our multicultural patients and their caregivers. We want to have a kind, empathetic, trustworthy communication response so that your patients trust you, know that you are providing the best care possible, and so they will return for your services in the future. And you also want to make sure that you are doing your best, because that's what we're here for, to take care of others in their times of need. Some of the ways that we can work on our therapeutic response is to develop a knowledge of cultures. Now I'm going to move ahead into this slide where I put together some information for you about how to learn about other cultures. One important thing that we have access to is technology. We can utilize this technology for research. In the past, if you wanted to learn about other cultures, you maybe would have had to find somebody from that culture or go to the library and check out a book. Now we have our handy dandy phones and our computers. These technology resources can help us a great deal find information quickly. You might see, oh, I have a patient coming in and I want to find out a little bit more about them, or they came in last week, but I want to do a little better job about knowing about their culture this week. So let me look up some information before they come in. Now you can read online news sources where you Google French news in English to find out maybe a little bit of what is happening in their country. You can follow social media about your chosen culture. Maybe you want to find out more about what's happening in the French culture. You might follow social media of their politicians, their artists, their movie stars. You might want to look up about different cities in the country so you can find out more information about your culture. Of course, you can look on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and you can search up different people, famous people, politicians, like I said, and you can learn about their values, their healthcare, their cuisine, and fashion. So for example, healthcare, you might look up prominent French doctors and find out some information about what they are saying about the coronavirus, for example. You can also just look up French healthcare system and find out how people in France are treated, because every country has a little different system. So somebody from a French background might not be familiar with how we do things in the United States. And if you're aware of what they kind of are expecting, you might be able to help guide them into an easier transition into what we do in the United States. Also, cuisine, it might sound kind of fun, but it is important to know about the foods of other cultures, because food and what we intake in our body has a lot to do with our health, of course. Also exercise. So if you have a knowledge base about the foods that a certain culture likes to eat, that can make you better prepared to be, as their health provider, to make recommendations if they're having a health issue that might be related somehow to their food consumption. You can ask questions online. What is their daily life like? Current events. There's so many resources that you can have at your fingertips with the computer. YouTube videos. That is a very popular way to find out information about a culture. And as this PowerPoint states, there are many culture channels dedicated to specific cultures or aspects of a culture. I mean, if you just looked up French healthcare on YouTube, I'm sure you would find many videos that talk about the healthcare system in France. You can take a trip to the library. We still have our libraries out there, and you can check out travel books you can look and see maps and geography and find out maybe where your patient actually is from in a certain country or where their ancestors are from. So you can have a better idea about the background of this person. You can also watch films from other cultures to find out about them. Let's say you work in a doctor's office that has a large amount of people from Italy or Puerto Rico or China. If you watch movies, read some books, read some online information, you can get more information about how those people have been raised and what they're thinking about, what they're feeling. Um, it also can affect how people view you as a healthcare provider coming from different cultures. Now, this is a little bit of a different example, but I once read a book and it talked about airplane pilots. And it talked about how in different countries, the co-pilot might not question what the pilot says because, like, that could be disrespectful. So even if the co-pilot thinks the pilot is making a mistake, he or she may not say anything because that would be disrespectful. So taking that example in a healthcare setting, if you are working with someone and let's say they're from a culture that doesn't want to be disrespectful, maybe you're a male and they're a female, and some cultures females don't want to be disrespectful to men, they might not question you even if they don't necessarily agree with you. And in our country, typically people like to think of themselves as equal. At least that's how I see it. So that might be surprising to you, but you might find some patients who don't speak up to you or question something you say to them only because they don't want to be disrespectful. So and if that was to happen, you might say, do you have any questions? Do you understand what I'm saying? Are you okay with the medications we're providing you today? Really question the person and give them opportunity and say, it's okay. If you have some, please let me know. I'm here to help you. Really emphasize how you are here to help them. So that's some information about learning about other cultures. I know we talk about that a lot, so I wanted to provide you information with how to do it. So we're going to go back here to our other slide and understanding communication styles. How do people communicate with one another? Sometimes people are not big talkers. They can just listen, nod their head. You don't know what they're thinking. They might not look at you in the face, not provide the eye contact you're used to. There's a lot of different communication styles. So you do need to understand that, especially if you find that in your particular office you see a lot of people of a certain background. Definitely do some research and find out more about that. You can also determine your degree of cultural assimilation. What does that mean? Well, you might work in, let's say, a city that has a lot of immigrants from a certain, maybe someplace in South America, and maybe those people haven't assimilated to our American lifestyle as much as if you were working someplace else where everybody were born and raised in the United States. And even if they come from a different background and culture, they were still born here, went to American schools, and they're more assimilated into our country and our healthcare system. Assess immigration status. Now, That has become a bigger deal in the last few years. Some people don't want to let other people know about their immigration status. Maybe they're here illegally and they don't want anyone to find out. Depending on what kind of office you're working in, this could be an issue. So you do want to be aware of that when you go to work, and see how your office addresses immigration status if that is a concern, because some people might not be as forthcoming if they're scared of being caught in some manner but are seeking medical care. You want to create a comfortable atmosphere. You want to make sure the patients know that they are in good hands, that they can trust you, that you are there for them. Now, this can be done in a variety of different ways. It can be the way the office is set up. It can be the way you talk to the patient. It can come across from how you dress. If you're very formal, or if you're in scrubs, or if the doctor's wearing a white coat. Sometimes those white coats can put people off. They see that as someone of authority and they get nervous. So, different aspects of an office environment can affect people's comfort levels, and with that can affect how much or how little they communicate with the healthcare providers. And with that being said, you want to approach your client slowly and respectfully. You never want to assume that you're best friends with the person. At times, you might develop a very nice relationship and you can maybe let your guard down a little bit, but you always want to be professional. You always want to be respectful. You don't want to assume that everything's okay and you can talk about things that you might not talk about with most people, because some that could come back, to get you in trouble, possibly, depending on the patient at hand. So you want to be slow and respectful, and you want to always, as I've stated before, show that you care. You want to recognize and respect nonverbal mannerisms. Now, as you've been learning, nonverbal communication is a huge component of communication. Communication is not just what comes out of our mouth, it's how we say it. It's how our hands are. Now, we know that some cultures talk with their hands a lot and they're very empathetic, and some people can just stand there like this and you have no idea what they're thinking and their face is blank. So, you need to be aware of these things and be clued in to that just because someone's going like this doesn't mean they're angry at you. And just because someone's like this doesn't mean they're totally compliant and believe and trust and understand everything you're saying. You might need to ask some probing questions to make sure that your communication is being received correctly from the patient. You can consider using an interpreter for a language barrier, as we discussed in past video. So I won't go into that too much, but I did talk a lot about how a medical interpreter can really help you overcome language barriers. You can ask clients for their views on the illness. Let's say someone is diagnosed with cancer. Find out, how do they feel about that? What is their grand view? If it's cancer that's caught early and you have a good prognosis for it, and even if you're not the doctor necessarily, you're still maybe talking to the patient even more than the doctor is, and you want to be there and be by their side, and you want to hear what they have to say. You don't want just a lot of information being thrown at the patient. It can be overwhelming. You want to hear what they have to say, which goes into line with use reflecting questions or statements, those open-ended questions that we will talk about in the next chapter, the next week of the course. But reflecting questions, why are you feeling this way? How can I help you? Open-ended, where they can provide more insight and give you more information. With that information, you can better help them to treat them appropriately and properly. You want to allow sufficient time. Now, that can be difficult sometimes because the way medical offices are set up these days, sometimes healthcare professionals are expected to see a certain number of patients in a certain amount of time. So, the more you get comfortable at your job, the more you can, I think, do a better job with time management and know that if you have 20 minutes allotted to see a patient, you can get the job done. It could be hard at times depending on the patient and the needs, but you do need to be aware of time constraints both on your patient's part and on your employer's part, but making sure you provide the sufficient time to meet the needs of your patient. You want to respect their dietary and folk customs. Now, I'm going to talk about dietary restrictions in a few moments. And the folk customs can be that sometimes people don't always believe in Western medicine as our traditional United States healthcare system is based. There are a lot of people who believe in other sorts of remedies and acupuncture and herbs. There's many different things out there. I'm not an expert on that, but I know that there are a lot of treatments out there that people fully prescribe to and feel that they are better than Western medicine. So now if someone is in your office and they've come to you for help, then you think and hope that they want the help that you have to provide. But you do have to be aware that these customs and other types of healing might be something that your patient might use at some point in their treatment. And with that, you don't want to jump to conclusions. Just because you say, okay, take these pills and you'll be better, that patient is going to go home and take those pills just like you said. They might say, yeah, okay, I'll do that. But they might get home and be like, I think I'm going to wait a couple days. So, be understanding. If the patient comes back and you say, well, didn't you do this and that? And they said, no, I didn't feel like it, or I got distracted, or I thought I was feeling better. Don't get upset at your patient. Be understanding. Don't jump to conclusions and just try to be a good healthcare provider because we never know how someone is feeling in their shoes. Okay. So we went through how to learn about other cultures. And I want to go back to when I was talking about comfort, ways to improve the patient experience. First of all, you want to minimize the wait times to see a specialist or to see the doctor in your office. You want to work with whoever you can in your office to make sure the office runs smoothly. Um, I can be a very patient person, but when I see things are disorganized and not running well, I can get frustrated, and people are anxious in doctors' offices, so be aware of the wait times. Express the concern over their symptoms. As I said, be empathetic, be understanding. Don't just be like, oh, you have a headache? Okay, well, that happens sometimes. No, just be like, I'm sorry to hear that. There are simple things you can do and say to show understanding and concern. And that's all sometimes people want is just that, I'm sorry you're feeling that way. That's a very nice statement. It shows understanding, concern, but it's not like you're offering a solution that maybe you don't have. You want to demonstrate interest in the patient experience. I know that caregivers often say, how are you doing today? How is trying to park if it's a doctor's office that's busy and hard to get a parking space? Now that we have telemedicine going on, that changes things some. So you might have different questions you might want to ask and see about the patient experience at the office. And this runs into starting conversations with caregivers and caregivers. You might get a lot of background information that you wouldn't get with just formal questions like, why are you here today? You say, how has your day been? How has your week been? They might give you information that they weren't necessarily planning on giving. It's coming at something in an indirect way. You want to make the patient feel comfortable. You want the waiting area to be comfortable for the patient. You want to minimize as much as possible the bureaucracy, which in my mind is the paperwork that patients are given to do. Now, nowadays, a lot of times you're asked to complete paperwork before you even get there, which can be annoying. It's something else you have to do, but it does make it a little bit easier when you get to the office and you can just sit and wait to be called. Help complete the paperwork if and when necessary, and try to manage the patient expectations. If you're working at the front desk and somebody's like, how much longer? And you really don't know how much longer it's going to be, you say, well, I'm really not sure, but let me go check with the nurse and I'll get back to you. And do that. Don't say, oh, it's 5-10 minutes, when you know deep down it's going to be more like 30 minutes. Be truthful. People appreciate that information and they understand that you're trying to do the best you can. And with that, it's making people feel important, demonstrating empathy. You know, those people are coming to your office for a reason. There's something going on with them, or they're just having a well checkup. But you want to be understanding. They're in a doctor's office, a healthcare setting, wherever you might be working, and you want to be understanding to their needs. Include those caretakers. A lot of people do come to the office with someone else, and include those people in the conversation. And or if the caretaker is really the one taking care of the patient, make sure you're including the patient in the conversation. You don't want to just isolate the person or the caregiver. If they're there at the office, they're there for a reason. And as we always say, look them in the eyes. That's something we do in our culture in the United States, maybe not in other cultures, but we do look people in the eyes and try to talk to them clearly, concisely. Try to use appropriate words or explain things when necessary. Those are some things that can help improve the patient experience. Now I'm going to go back to those dietary definitions. There are a lot of dietary restrictions that people have, and when you're in healthcare and you're taking prescription drugs, or maybe you have to prepare for a colonoscopy and you need to drink things the day before. As a healthcare provider, you need to be aware of different definitions of different ways that people nowadays are eating. For example, we have vegans who only eat plant-based diets with no animal products. They do not eat meat, fish, eggs, or dairy products. You can have an ovo-vegetarian, which I learned about for getting this slide together, where they eat mostly plants in addition to eggs, but they do not eat dairy products, meat, or fish. You can have a lacto-vegetarian who eats mostly plants in addition to dairy products, but they don't eat eggs, meat, or fish. Or lacto-ovo-vegetarians that eat mostly plants in addition to dairy products and eggs, and they don't eat meat or fish. And then lastly, there's pescatarians who have a vegetarian diet, but they only eat fish. They do not eat meat, and so they probably don't eat eggs. So these are things to keep in mind, be aware of, be sensitive to when you're talking to people about their diets. You might not be an expert, you might not remember all this, but if you have a general knowledge base that these things are out there, that'll make you a more prepared healthcare worker. Then we have common food allergies. Now, food allergies are a big component nowadays, especially with children. There are many children who have significant food allergies, and these children are getting older, obviously, and are becoming young adults and adults. So you are going to run into this where I have a close friend whose son has very significant allergies, and so when he wants to get his flu shot, he has to go to a special doctor and stay there all day to get the flu shot to make sure he doesn't have a reaction because there is egg in the flu shot. Or I don't want to give out incorrect information, but I believe that there are certain flu shots that have egg in them that could cause a reaction. So anyways, you might just take these things for granted, but we really can't. People can have peanut allergies, wheat, milk, soy, egg, fish, and shellfish. And when you say peanut, you might think, oh, well, I don't eat peanuts, but there are also nut allergies, cashews, almonds, maybe macadamia nuts, coconut, wheat. Can be This is an allergy that you can have, and it says not to be confused with gluten intolerance, which some people have. And these allergies can be mild and they can be life-threatening. Sometimes people need to have an EpiPen with them at all times in case they have an allergic reaction, and they might need to go to the hospital if they do. Their throats can get swollen, and they can die quickly if they are not treated quickly if they are having an allergic reaction. Milk. A lot of people are drinking almond milk, cashew milk. They're moving away from the milk products and animal products that create milk because of allergies. People can get hives, and sometimes these allergies, as I say, can be life-threatening. Soy, if you look at food products, there's a lot of products with soy in it. They can be mild or severe. Those severe reactions are rare. Now, eggs can create a lot of food allergies, and sometimes children can outgrow them. And children a lot of times go for allergy testing to see if they outgrow things. Some do, some don't, and it's just, you never know. So you should always be aware of food allergies. And lastly, fish and shellfish. All different kinds of fish, shellfish, lobster, shrimp, and these things can become airborne in the steam released while cooking. So most shellfish reactions tend to be severe. So it's best to avoid all shellfish if there is an allergic reaction to any of them. So I just wanted to make you aware of this. We all just come from very different backgrounds. And with these different backgrounds are a lot of different things, that the religion, the food, the dietary restrictions, the folk medicine. So we need to be aware of these things to be good communicators. And lastly, I'll just talk about religious restrictions with food. If you may or may not be aware of these, but some religions restrict you from eating certain foods. Um, Buddhism, none is forbidden, but many people will not eat meat or fish. Christianity, in general, no food is forbidden except maybe at certain times of the year for certain holidays, or I believe during Lent, you might only eat fish on Fridays. Hinduism, they are forbidden to eat meat, fish, poultry, and eggs. They might avoid garlic, onions, alcohol, tea, and coffee, so they are typically vegetarians. In Judaism, they don't eat things with animal origin, non-kosher meats like pork, birds of prey, and non-kosher foods such as prawns, which are shrimp, shellfish, and other types of seafood. So, and then Islam is forbidden pork, lard, or any pork substances. So, people follow these restrictions, and it is something to be aware of when you're prescribing medicine or talking to people about their diets. So, with all that being said, I am a UMA instructor, but I'm not there right now to answer your questions. I hope you found this information informative. And if you do have questions, please go to your UMA instructor to find out more information about these topics, or you can do your own research online or use the UMA library. And then take this information and use it to reflect on this topic as you prepare to do the rest of your work this week. You want to use this content, this material in your readings and the interactives in the course room, as well as any research you do on your own, to maximize your learning. We're trying to give you as much information and education as possible during your online learning experience, and I greatly hope that you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much and have a good day.